In the short gap between the Belgian and San Marino races, the International Garden Festival opened in Liverpool. Brainchild of Environment Minister Michael Heseltine to try and revitalise tourism and commerce in the city, it was a roaring success, attracting nearly 3.5 million visitors over the summer. A narrow-gauge railway took visitors around the grounds, where installations included a statue of John Lennon, a yellow submarine, and a red dragon with a slide in the mouth designed by a competition winner on Blue Peter. On the Saturday, it was Eurovision time again, held in Luxembourg following Corinne Hermè's win the previous year. 19-year-old Desiree Nosbusch hosted in an unusually conversational style, switching freely between English, French, German and Luxembourgish, often mid-sentence.
Quelle atmosphère de fête ici. Est-il quelque chose d'extra ce soir? Let me tell you, this is one of the greatest moments of all my young life, but it's also the hardest. Herzklopfen nennt man sowas, kann man das hören? Wir lösen den Schei. Guten Abend, alle gut zusammen. Willkommen hier an der Stadt, am neuen Theater zu Lützeburg. Luxemburgo vi invita al Grand Prix d'Eurovision, da fängt's an, de la chanson 1984.
The British entry, Belle and the Devotions, with Love Games, was greeted with booing in the hall after English football fans had rampaged in Luxembourg City the previous autumn, and the competition was won by pair Richard and Louis Herry, entering as Herries, with what would become one of the most famous Eurovision bangers, Diggy Loo, Diggy Lay. After Alboreto's win in Belgium, wearing the number 27 forever associated with Gilles Villeneuve, who'd lost his life at the same track 2 years earlier, the Imola circuit organisers were rubbing their hands in anticipation of a bumper crowd, and they would have one extra Italian car to watch out for, as Ozella took the opportunity of a home race to wheel out one of last year's models for their test driver Joe Gartner. The team had only registered one car for the championship, so he wasn't eligible to score points, but it wasn't like he'd be troubling the scorers anyway. Joe Gartner was born in Vienna in 1954, when the city was still divided between the four occupying powers, and it wasn't until his early 20s that he took his first step into racing, having saved up enough to buy a Super V car, a series that was to Volkswagen what Formula Renault or Formula Ford was to their respective manufacturers. Gartner was extremely fast in his Super V, coming second in the 1978 series and moving straight up to Formula 3, then Formula 2 in successive years. Driving a self-entered year-old Tollman chassis in 1981, he scored himself a seat at the Mazzario team for 1982, but it turned out to be a backward step, and so in 1983 he went back out on his own again, with finance from Emco and a Spirit chassis. He won a chaotic race at Pau when Alain Ferté was disqualified. His profile was raised again within Austria, and he got sponsorship from Austrian tobacco brand Milde Sorte to try and make the final step into Formula 1. Not that the Tifosi packing the stands gave much of a monkeys about Ozella or about Riccardo Patrese, who was celebrating his 100th Grand Prix start here, the 19th driver in F1 history to reach this milestone. Nope, they were here to see the Ferraris, and on Friday they didn't like what they saw. On a damp track, Piquet topped the timing sheets, followed by Prost, Tombe, De Cesaris, Warwick, Rosberg, Fabi, Lauda, Mansell, and finally Arnoux in 10th. Alboreto could only manage 24th and ran out of fuel at the end of the session and had to be towed back in, while the Alfa Romeos weren't faring well either, Cheever investigating the cause of a smoking engine. The stony silence around the track was deafening, while the unfortunate Tollman team weren't able to run at all, as an unspecified disagreement with Pirelli left them without any tyres. With a bit of overnight brokering from Bernie, Tollman secured permission to run on Pirellis for this event, but would be looking for a new supplier after that, and Saturday's session was drier and almost everyone improved their times, but not by enough in the case of Ferrari for their legions of fans. Instead, it was Piquet on pole, with Prost alongside, then Rosberg and Warwick. Ferrari traitor Lauda was 5th alongside Arnoux, with Winkelhock, Cheever, Fabi and Patrese making up the top 10. Alboreto was an unhappy 13th alongside an equally unhappy Tombe, with Lafitte 15th and Marc Surer taking his first turn in the Turbo Arrow 16th. Ghinzani had car trouble and was the only man not to improve his time on Saturday, while Senna's Hart engine was plagued with a misfire all day and he ended up dead last, 13 seconds off the pace. These two were the non-qualifiers, meaning that Joe Gartner would get to start his first race. Once again, FISA organised a parade of the top 6 drivers in the table, and once again it was a rather disorganised affair, which the drivers didn't seem to be taking entirely seriously. And then it was time for everyone to head off for the grid. All except Andrea De Cesaris, whose Renault engine was only firing on 4 cylinders. By the time Ligier got the other 2 working, the pit lane was closed and he'd have to start from where he was. Everyone else lined up for the start, and when the lights went green, 22 cars roared away, while Keke Rosberg, again, Niki Lauda and Jonathan Palmer all put their feet down and found their engines not responding. Keke moved and then stopped, Niki stopped and then moved and had to go around Rosberg as he recovered. Meanwhile, Piquet and Prost led the pack through the long, sweeping left-hander of Tamburello, with the McLaren getting in front, while Piquet had Warwick on his tail. Further back, the other Renault was out at Tosa, Tombe having had a coming together in the pack with Chiva, who ended up with a flat tyre and came in for a replacement. Elsewhere, Lafitte and Hainaut had a Gallic disagreement over space on the track, and the Ligier came off worst, retiring on the spot. So at the end of lap 1, it was Prost, Piquet, Warwick, Arnoux, Winkelhock and Alboreto who'd made a cracking start from 13th. Prost was already pulling out quite a lead on Piquet, who couldn't shake Warwick. Mansell, who'd said before the race he didn't expect to go further than 3 laps following persistent engine problems, went out when one of his brake disc mountings snapped, pitching him into a spin, and Rosberg's electronic engine management system gave up the ghost, having been giving him power in fits and starts for a couple of laps. Meanwhile, Alboreto had got past Winkelhock and was rapidly gaining on his teammate Arnoux, while Prost had fairly cleared off into the distance, pulling out a huge lead over Piquet already. The Brabham in turn had got some breathing room ahead of Warwick, who now had to worry about the 2 Ferraris bearing down on him, much to the delight of the fans at the track. Further back, Lauda was also flying, setting fastest lap on lap 6 and making his way rapidly up the order. Riccardo Patrese Centennial ended rather ignominiously on lap 6 when his electronics went on the fritz, while Lauda had rapidly motored up to the back of the 2 Ferraris, drove past Alboreto, then Arnoux, and headed off in pursuit of Warwick. The Tifosi at the track looked aghast. Williams' miserable race ended on lap 12 as Jacques Lafitte pulled in with more engine troubles, while Lauda had wasted no time in catching Warwick, but the Renault had a bit more grunt than the Ferraris and he was held up getting past, allowing Arnoux and Alboreto to close up again. As they came through traffic, Joe Gartner, having his own battle with Jonathan Palmer, fairly leaped out of the way as the battling pair came through, still going at it hammer and tongs. That is until Lauda's engine went pop on lap 16 and he pulled his smoking McLaren over. Prost, meanwhile, was also having some problems with his engine management system. With a lead of some 25 seconds over Piquet by 1/3 distance, he suddenly slowed on his way out of the Variante Bassa, had a hard time catching and lapping Boutsen in the Ford-powered Arrows, then had a sudden lock-up when braking for Tosa, though it looked rather like another electronic glitch. While all this was going on, off-camera Warwick had caught and passed Piquet for second place, so he would be hoping for something to go terminally wrong on Prost's car, just as all the Ferrari fans in the stands were. A few laps later the Tifosi were disappointed further, as Alboreto came in to retire with a cracked exhaust. Prost's car seemed to sort itself out again, and with Alboreto gone, the best viewing on the track was between Warwick and Piquet over second place, now some 30 seconds behind Prost. Piquet got back past the Renault, while some way behind them Fabi was up to 4th but being chased by Arnoux, who seemed to be having more trouble than he was expecting getting past. Prost came in on the stroke of half distance and left the pit still in a comfortable lead, while Arnoux finally bullied his way past Fabi, and Winkelhock, who'd been dropping back all afternoon, finally fizzled out. De Cesaris had made his way up to 6th by this stage, a fine drive by the young Italian, albeit unnoticed and unappreciated by most, and Chiva had also recovered well from his early stop and was coming up nicely. Warwick was planning to run non-stop and was conserving both tyres and fuel, and his 4th gear had gone missing and he had a slight misfire, so Arnoux was able to catch up fairly quickly and Derek didn't make a fight of it. The glum mood in the stands lightened a little as Arnoux began reeling in second-place Piquet. By now it was a little over 2/3 distance and Arnoux was able to close up when Piquet was balked by Alio's ram. The race for second was all over on lap 49 when Piquet's BMW engine started smoking as he went down the pit straight, and he turned round to retire in the pits. A blown turbo, the culprit once again. As if synchronised, Fabi's did the same, and both Brabhams were out. Warwick, meanwhile, was frustratedly having to turn his boost pressure down even further to conserve fuel, and De Cesaris and De Angelis came by, leaving him 5th, albeit with the decent cushion over Chiva as long as he didn't get any slower. De Cesaris and De Angelis were running together, and with just 6 laps to go, there was a good scrap developing between the Ligier and the Lotus, both using the same Renault engines, over 3rd place. It had been some time since a Ligier had looked this good, at least until poor Andrea pulled over out of fuel with 2 laps to go. So, as Prost completed his last lap to take his second win of the year, a lapped Warwick trailing in his wake recovered 4th. Arnoux finished second. Elio De Angelis also ran out of fuel halfway around the last lap, but since he was the only other driver on the lead lap, he still got 3rd. And Beloff and Boutsen, both driving normally aspirated and less fuel-thirsty cars, took the other points' places, leaving the unfortunate De Cesaris 7th. Eddie Cheever might have taken a point himself, but he also ran out of petrol in the closing laps. If the Ferrari fans were happy to see Arnoux on the podium, the celebrations were muted. The Scarlet cars had been well beaten by the McLarens and everyone knew it. Prost was looking pretty unassailable at the top of the table, with Warwick's points keeping him in second place. With so many cars running out of fuel, pressure was already beginning to grow within FOCA to try and pressure FISA for an increase in fuel capacity for 1985. But Ken Tyrrell, who didn't mind one bit when everyone else broke down, remained opposed, and without unanimity, there wasn't much chance of anything happening. With most of the teams having driven straight from Zolder to Imola, it was time to head home, to do the laundry and see the kids in the 2-week gap before the French Grand Prix at Dijon.